My name is Jon Douglas. Thanks so much for coming to this talk. This talk is called Enough. This is a book I'm writing, and I just want to kind of give some credit out really quick. The images that you'll see throughout this deck come from Visualize Value, a person named Jack Butcher. Quite some awesome minimalist illustrations that you'll kind of see that tie into kind of the narrative of this talk. So. I did mention that I am writing a book. It's called Enough, Seeking Less in a World of More. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into what it's about and what it's not about. So I want to give a disclaimer first. You probably know by now that this is not a technical talk, but it is my story while I'm working in tech. And I want to be very clear that there's a lot of those challenges from the stress, from the anxiety that brings a lot of those different types of things. I do talk about COVID-19 briefly because it is a major event that shifted my perspective. So do keep in mind that's kind of I'll talk about my experience with it and how that kind of shifted some of my perspective. So I want to give that disclaimer up front in case it's a sensitive topic for you. I'm also only 30 years old. I have been in tech since I was about 16. So I might come off a little naive just due to my age and the process of aging. So I don't promise to provide any solutions to any of these problems I'll be talking about, but I am verbal about them, and at least being able to talk openly about them, I think will help people relate and understand some of these challenges. And last but not least, if this talk made you feel like uncomfortable or think critically about something, I might have done my job. So I just want to put that disclaimer up there and in front. So without further ado, this is kind of some visualizations of how I was looking for an answer. Kind of the pandemic started. I started to see my career starting to see different changes. I've been a remote worker my whole life, and I was kind of asking myself the question of, is there more to life? Is there more than just a big tech job? Is there more to all this anxiety, all this stress, all this, everyone's attention, and all this stuff? And so I kind of came to this, this idea of like, what is my story? Like, am I the hero of it? And I kind of went through of what my story is so far, right? I graduated in 2013 with computer science. I took a job at a startup straight out of school, building a mobile app framework that people are probably aware of called Xamarin. It sounded more like a drug company at a time, but it was something I always loved. I loved the idea that you can build mobile apps with C#, and I want to be part of that mission. We eventually got acquired by Microsoft in 2016. I kind of did a job that was software engineering, support engineering, product management. I wore a lot of different hats while I was working at Xamarin. And I changed careers officially to technical product management, which is, it's its own discipline. We deal with building product and making sure users are happy when building technical products. So in 2020, I moved to the Nougat team, which had its own challenges itself. A lot of new faces, a lot of different people, and different domain as well. I did a lot of mobile app dev, and now I did a lot of package management. I'm now the author of 2 books throughout that time. I wrote this book called The Part-Time Programmer, which is a book about what I wish I knew when I was getting into tech. And I basically put everything out there of here's all the tips, here's how I'd learn it, here's how I'd restart basically. And it's done pretty well so far. So, but I also have a new book coming out that I mentioned. It's called Enough, and that will come out later this summer. What I love to do when I have any spare time is I love helping people. I ran a TikTok for just a kind of as an experiment, and I started posting all this content about helping people get into tech. Needless that I know that it would explode, and I'd reach 25,000 followers in like 3 months or something like that. And I just kind of found that like it was just such an exciting experiment, and it was interesting. But at the same time, it's something that I'll talk a little bit further about what I realized from it. I also did YouTube for a bit, and I love YouTube, but I'll be probably moving on from technical content to more to different content. Last but not least, I love to write. I've written a blog ever since the beginning of my tech days, and I still do up to today. And I talk more on product management. I talk about leadership. I talk about a lot of different things that are a little bit higher level. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. But let's talk about the actual reason why you came here, which is enough. So this kind of diagram here is it's going to be hard to visualize right now, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about your reason of being. I kind of had to take a step back in 2020 when everything was kind of shifting, and I had to think about my life and really my life purpose. There's this idea of ikage, which means a combination of what you love, what you're great at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs, right? And so I had a lot of challenges here. I knew what I was good at. I knew what I can get paid for. But did the world need it? And did I love it? Those are some of the questions that I had that were openly on my mind. Was this my real purpose? I had to rediscover here, which was I found writing again. I started to help others, and I realized very quickly that videos can scale and you can provide value out into the world, but writing ultimately was the tool to do all that through. And I rediscovered it again, which was really cool because, like I said, I wrote a lot of blogs. I did all this stuff with writing, but I didn't actually use it like in expressing myself and expressing, my purpose. And so I did find a little bit there. But what I really did was I just asked myself what I'd love to do when I was a kid. And of course, writing was the big thing. I love to write stories. I love to write fiction. Love to write. And I asked myself, like, why wasn't I doing this more? Why wasn't I actually writing again? And, I kind of came to, like I mentioned earlier, I wrote 2 books over the last couple of years. I just found writing again, which was awesome. But this brings me into self-sabotaging. I'm sure a lot of us have done this before, but I found myself just constantly in a feedback loop of consuming. I'd always consume other people's content. I'd always consume videos. I'd consume shows. I'd consume everything from a screen, right? And I wasn't creating. It actually took away a lot of time from me. Where when I did start to create, I started to see a whole different world. It actually shifted like how I saw the consumption versus the creation aspects of the world. And if you relate to that, try creating for a bit. It's really fun. It's really engaging. It's a whole different game. But it kind of had the passion, my original passion, just always in the back of my head. I'd always be thinking about writing. I'd always be thinking about how I can help other people through it. I was always thinking about this thing, but I never acted upon it because I was constantly consuming content, constantly. And I fell in bad patterns. And, I'm sure a lot of us have done that over the last couple of years, but I just kept consuming. I self-sabotaged all the time. And so I don't know, just one day I kind of vowed to myself that I'm going to get better every day. I'm going to consume less. I'm going to create more. I'm going to put my message out there for the world to see if people relate to it, see if people can if the help helps, like all this type of stuff. Just put my real self out into the world, and to do for every waking minute of time that I have free, I'm going to do the thing that I'm passionate for, and I'm going to do it with all my willpower, which means it's the most important thing I do every single day before I get to the other things. So this kind of brings us to this idea of momentum, which is this kind of visualization is about notifications, and the more notifications, the more distractions we have, our momentum kind of gets lost. And so I thought about this. I thought about all this stimulation is just making me bored. I've been overstimulated since I want to say birth. I know that's a little bit exaggerated, but I grew up in the age where the internet was going mainstream. I had a 56K internet connection and got cable in my early teens. I kind of had this ennui, this boredom with regards to in my 20s. Just all the hobbies that I had were surrounding the internet in some way. Video games, content creation of like making YouTube videos when it first came out, building mobile applications, coding, all this stuff just surrounded the internet, and I kind of got bored of it in my 20s, in a way that's like, again, it's an ennui type of boredom. Look that word up if you don't know what that means. But it was just it's just hard to describe that type of boredom. And so I kind of looked around and saw that there's just an infinite amount of these devices surrounding me. I work in tech. And outside of tech, I'm on tech, right? There's laptops, there's desktops, there's tablets, there's the television, there's smart fridges and smart toasters nowadays. And I just kind of saw that, everything was kind of a notification almost. I would consume on them. I wouldn't create as much as I wanted to. And so this kind of brought me to this idea of like hot boredom and cold boredom, where, a hot boredom is like you're sitting at the DMV and you'd rather be doing something else, like being with your friends or going out to dinner or something exciting like that's there, right? But there's also this cold boredom that I felt like I lost almost entirely and for many years, which is, being able to just like sit and still and, not having to, swipe off notifications on my phone and just being able to embrace the present moment of, maybe I'm with my kids or maybe I'm enjoying being outdoors or something. And I kind of found that, this cold boredom is something that my brain just it wasn't wired for it anymore, and it took a while to readjust to having this type of boredom back in my life. Um, and so, this kind of brought this idea that like the novel became old, and I saw the first this first experiences that I had with it. They eventually became like recycled. I kind of saw the internet through its first phase, and now we're into I think the third phase, right? Which is I just started to see these the this whole everything just kind of being recycled, and I witnessed this innovation that is starting to be more commercialized to like our personal preferences now. You know, YouTube knows everything about you. TikTok knows everything about you. Like, and they become easier to consume, and it kind of opened my eyes a little bit of like this was kind of making me bored. And so again, these visualizations, they'll make sense as we go through the slides, but this kind of was this idea of this anxiety that was brought upon from all the stimulation, but it also is very self-perpetuating. I never struggled with anxiety previously. I did have a panic attack while we are living in those uncertain times. Excessive stress, work, family, kids, all that type of stuff. And I also got sick with COVID, January 2021. And so, I had quite a new friend that joined my life recently called anxiety, and I came to this acceptance that making progress with it was kind of my goal moving forward. How do I reduce my anxiety now, right? I was kind of thinking about it. Well, I have to remove all these triggers. A lot of the triggers at the time were a lot of news articles, a lot of work, even the fun apps that I was engaging in, the social media, and maybe like the roulette of content, right? All these things were triggering my anxiety, and I couldn't explain it. I couldn't really understand what it was. And this is hard. Anxiety is a hard topic, but this is how I can describe it. What really helped? Exercise. I did a lot of exercising. I started to run a lot. I started to lift weights. I started to play basketball and do like Spartan races. This all helped reduce all my anxiety. But also, I started to kind of dive into mindfulness, meditation. I know it sounds a little bit maybe far fetched. I'm not sure, but just being inside of your mind, like as a knowledge worker, has always been a challenge, right? You're always thinking about work. You don't want to be thinking about work as soon as you get off of work, but you're thinking about it anyway. And so meditation and these daily walks and just being outside in nature would just help so much. But what I kind of found out was that my anxiety eventually became a superpower for me. I started to now know when I should rest and when I should stop working, when I should stop being an overworker, an overachiever. Maybe I am consuming too much content, and my anxiety would skyrocket because I'm not doing what I want to do, which is my passion of writing, or being more involved in those passion projects, being with my family, doing everything that I feel that you know makes me me, right? And so I had to put my life before everything else, and anxiety actually helped me do that because I can feel it. I can actually understand when it came. So this is kind of bringing us into this idea that we live in a 24-hour world, but we don't really live in a 24-hour body. And one of the biggest things I started to notice was after this event happened, this panic attack, this anxiety, I started to notice that our attention is very scarce. I started to come across this idea of attention management. That became the way that I conducted all my work. I work in big tech. There's a lot of groups. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of not as much as attention as you think. And I started to see that once people's attention is on something, yeah, you can do anything. Like there's not like you can accomplish great feats as long as people's attention is somewhere. And I also noticed that I was like fighting for sleep a lot. I had a lot of long nights working, and I started to realize that sleep was my top priority. It was the only way that I could actually say fight this anxiety every day. I could be recharged and refreshed. Previously, I would just sit on consuming stuff, and maybe I was even creating to the late early mornings or whatever it might be. But as soon as I started to really dial in my sleep, I just noticed so much in my life. And I kind of came across this idea of like, resting is actually doing. Some people don't think that, but I started to get involved in like TikTok and this whole hustle culture, and this idea of like productivity porn and all this stuff, which were these ideas that I started to attach my identity to. If I grinded harder, if I worked harder, if I just kept going, I would be successful. And I had this huge attachment to success, but I realized that I was in it for the wrong reasons. And so when I would sit idle, this would make me anxious. I mentioned this earlier, but I just felt guilty that I was not working towards my future at all, and that would just spiral, and it beget itself. And so going back to that hot and cold boredom, I kind of thought about my brain in two ways. You have a fast brain and you have a slow mind. You have your emotions of kind of your fast reactions, but you have kind of like your slow mind of like the logic behind it. And sometimes, you can act with your fast brain and then your slow mind will catch up and be like, wait, what are you doing? Or why are you doing that? And so this brought me to this brink of burnout. I'm sure many of us have burnt out over the last couple of years, maybe a little bit. I know I have a couple of times, and I kind of saw burnout as a combination of a few different things. I saw it as depression being number one. I saw it as exhaustion, physical, mental, emotional, maybe even spiritual, just exhaustion of not being able to do the things we want to do. Unclear purpose was, why am I doing this? Do people see that like all this work is getting done? Is this, like, I don't know, maybe I care too much about it. And I saw a lot of uncertainty as well, like uncertain about the future, uncertain about maybe even the past, just a lot of uncertainty. And so, and burnout was a combination of those four things to me. But I started to, anxiety being my superpower, I saw that I was acting irrationally, right? This is how I knew that I was burnt out. I was starting to be, very cold to other people. I'm not usually like this. I'm actually very happy-go-lucky and, optimistic about the world. I'd have little satisfaction from those accomplishments. I would accomplish great things. I'd find that success that I hustled so much to get. but I did not feel satisfied about them at all. And last but not least is like I wanted a new start. And I don't know if people think about that with burnout, but just let's hit reset. Let's refresh our lives. So this kind of is about perspective and how we can kind of see the world depending on our perspectives, which is I thought about the world as kind of like the immune system of the mind. I might have hit rock bottom, which is I had to find my rock. And people say that your rock is that thing or person that you rely on for all the help and support throughout the process. And to find your rock, you usually do what grounds you, right? Pun intended, I guess. But and so of course, my wife Stevie helped me through a lot of this. But I also found a lot of that passion coming back as things that grounded me. When I started to write again, it started to really ground me again. And even coding and doing fun projects and all the stuff I'd love to do when I was 14 or 15 before I actually got into the industry. I started to do all that again. I still just loved work, loved every day. Like it was great. But then I saw myself being more at least bigger than the pain that I was kind of going through at the time. There was a lot of this attention grabbing viruses of the current events, maybe work incidents, long nights, figuring everything out, and it just would continuously bring stress, continuously bring that anxiety, and a lot of the challenges I had were just kind of figuring out like, are these as pressing as they really are? Are these incidents actual things we have to deal with today, or are they things that can be dealt with tomorrow? Do I have to switch my context and all my focus here, or can I move on? Right. And so all this pain would just kind of tell me that I was kind of regressing, and I needed to change. I needed something to change. And so I found the acceptance of myself, which was I had to think about a lot of different things. But self-awareness helped me really understand that I'm not perfect. I could be an overachiever sometimes, and life was actually really fragile after I went through that panic attack. So I thought to myself, this curiosity and kindness was kind of the path forward of just questioning why I was doing what I was doing. Like just asking myself, hey, take a stop. Here's a stop sign. Um, why are you doing what you're doing right now? Can it wait? Can you be kinder to yourself? Can you ask more questions? Can you ask, like just kind of be the voice of reason really quick. You're not thinking in that slow mind. You're thinking with your emotion right now. How do we kind of get rid of that cloud, or how do we let it pass? And so there's kind of this moving up of kind of like there's a lot of change in our lives. The change is constant, but the rate of change is not. Over the last, gosh, I want to say what 5, 6 years, more and more people are on the internet, right? I think 65% of the world is now online. Internet's getting to more places around the world, and if you've ever opened up a social media app, there's more content than you could feasibly consume nowadays. And so it kind of brought me to like this, making progress every day, mentioned earlier. I needed to give my devices and my apps and all the websites and all the stuff that was in my life. I need to give it a job to be done. If you don't know what that is, Clayton M. Christensen has a great book on it. But more or less, my iPad does one thing. It's my Kindle kind of book reader, right? My work machine is just my work machine. It's not anything else. The apps that I do, they're intentional. I'm not just I pick one that might be fun, and then I might rotate it out or whatever it might be. So I give them jobs to be done, which is in my life there's a lot of different jobs. There's work, there's fun, there's entertainment, there's all these different types of things, and I had to kind of restructure and refocus my life in that sense. And so I saw this as like there's this concept of possibility where you know all this productivity is actually just kind of a trap to everything, at least how I saw it. Every decision that we have about time became a very hard decision to make. You think about the kind of the paradoxes of productivity is when you become so productive in your life, you have no time to do the things that you strive to be productive for. And that to me was very interesting. You just had no time to do the things because you're so productive. And so I kind of rethought about this, which was how can I reorganize my mind? How can I think about my mind being this personalized wishing tree? Anything that I thought about for long enough would come true. And so all the thoughts that I would think about of how I want to change my life, if I just put it in my mind, I would make that ample change. I would actually just follow it. And for me, it was like, I want to become a best-selling author, right? I just put that thought in my head and I just started writing, right? Everything just followed it. And so it really is the thought that counts, at least for me, right? So so that kind of brings us to this idea of like addition and multiplication. So work-life balance is kind of a it's kind of a battle between adding to our lives and multiplying to our lives. And so I found a lot of balance by doing a few things. The first thing I found was I had to let more people down. I had to make sure that when people gave me a to-do list of the things that they needed done, I also have my own, right? And you always had this battle of people's attention with regards to like say an email. That's just another someone else's to-do list, right? An email is someone else's to-do list. But I also have other work that I need to do, right? This other idea of life is work, but work is not life, right? You can think of it in the sense that everyone's life requires work, but if we let what work consume our lives, it's very challenging to I don't know come to a conclusion of a life well lived, I guess. And so this kind of just brought me to this conclusion of I just need to say no more often. And it's hard for me because I mentioned earlier that I'm a very optimistic person. I'm a yes person. I love saying I did improv comedy for over 5 years. I'm a yes and person, right? And it's hard to come to the conclusion of I have to be a no but person at this point in my life. And so I went forward and said, well, if I said no, I can then make my days more deterministic, which is all the days. Days can go by so fast. A whole year can go by so quickly. They can become a whirlwind of just events that will burn you out if you don't have a deterministic day. If you have no idea what happened in the last workday or the day that you did stuff, like it's time to reflect a little bit. And I saw that for me, I just had a whirlwind of a year or two, just a lot of stuff going on. Wasn't really sure, wasn't ahead of it, wasn't really planning anything, wasn't really. I was just kind of through the blender, and I realized that sometimes the problem isn't the job. It could be maybe the people around the job or the purpose of that job. And so this kind of thought, to me, it's like I don't really want to work more hours ever just to get a job done, but I want to deal with less bullshit so I can get more stuff that's meaningful done. And that's why like I found like actually just planning your day out in advance, planning out a full semester, a full year, goes a lot further than you think. And you can do this personally as well, which is write down at the beginning of your year, whatever your cycle is, write down what you hope to accomplish. And guess what will happen? You put that thought in your brain and you'll accomplish everything that you wrote down. It's incredible, at least my experience, right? And so going to this idea of doing what you love, they often say like people don't leave the bad jobs, they leave bad managers, but you can find fulfillment in your work in different ways. You don't have to get stuck in something that you don't feel you're growing. One of my favorite quotes is, if you feel like you're, the smartest in the room, you need to find a bigger room. And I've lived that to my full capacity throughout my whole career, which is as soon as I felt stuck, as soon as I felt like I wasn't growing, I went and found a different room. I am privileged and lucky enough to be in a very, very large room with very intelligent people. And so there's always opportunity to grow and learn from everyone. But it's brought me to this idea of less is more, which is, you can start to feel that your career is a bit finite in this realm of infinite possibilities. And so you have to bring structure to all this. And I saw my structure being all these systems of change that I needed to kind of bring into my life. I needed a plan. I needed an actual system to do the things that I wanted to accomplish. I couldn't just let the whirlwind of events happen. I had to think about this in a different way. And so one of the big things I noticed is I had to interrupt the pattern I was in. I was constantly distracted, constantly consuming, constantly doing things for other people that weren't the things that like I should be doing or what I found meaning in those things. And so, I talked about this earlier about just planning. Like I started to write down my expected days and my actual days. I'd compare those days and, as much as I could, just make them as deterministic as possible. And I just saw tremendous results. And so I thought about all these urges that I had throughout the day, checking social media or, you know, chatting with coworkers or whatever it might be. Is like I had these urges to like fall back into old patterns, and I had to keep note of them as they would happen. As like instead of doing the work that I put down 30 minutes to do, I would have this urge to like go on Twitter or go on LinkedIn or whatever it might be, and I found that I did that a lot. I kept like a little index card just next to my computer, and that thing looked crazy. It had like 20 checks on it. And I was like, wow, how often am I actually doing this, but for other things? I started to reach out and think about that a little bit further. And so that brought me to like, how do I change my actual behavior of this? I read a lot of books about habits and psychology and things like that. And I found two different books that I thought were really interesting. There's Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg and Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you read one habit book, you pretty much read them all. So just want to kind of throw that out there. But I found these two equations, or at least these two ideas. The first one was B equals MAP, which is your behavior is just a combination of your motivation to do something, your ability to do something, and some type of prompt. And you'll engage in any behavior. If your motivation is high enough, but you don't have the ability to do it, as long as there's a prompt, you'll do it. If your motivation is low, but it's really easy for you, or your ability is really high, and you have some type of prompt, you'll do it. And I started to see this pattern through pretty much everything I did. I could apply it everywhere. Um, but then there's this habit loop, which is, why am I doing the things I'm doing? There's this cue, this craving, this response and reward. And I started to map this to all the stuff that was kind of my old habits of, okay, I had this cue to check my smartphone. I had this craving to see what that notification was. I had this response of, seeing what it is. And the reward was, oh, okay, it was just, some Domino's notification or something like that, right? And so it brought me to like I had to kind of embrace my uncomfort of this what I was doing. I found myself like almost frozen and paralyzed from making the change that I think would actually be meaningful in my life. And I talked about this earlier about that self sabotage. I had all these dreams. I had this life I wanted to live, and it's hard. Like you can't really feel safe if you want the life you dream, and that has its own complexities to it. But we'll get to that a little bit later. And so I found like stoicism and this idea of being stoic really helping, which is, have the courage to take regular action every day, have the temperance to find balance in everything, just a moderate amount of it consuming, a moderate amount of creating does wonders to the world. Find some justice in accepting the world as it is. It's an unfair game if you think about it, and have the wisdom to be a student for life. Always be learning and always be finding and absorbing, and there's just so much out in the world that we can learn from. So this I talk a lot about perspectives, but this was another perspective shift, which was these major events that we have in our lives change our perspective, like the one I just talked about earlier with my panic attack. That changed my whole perspective, and it still is. And so, I went through a lot of pain, but I realized that this pain is not permanent, right? This pain started to leave once, I guess it was done teaching me. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but what I realized was like how I reacted to these things really mattered. When I would get anxiety, when I'd have a panic attack, when I'd go through these events, if I really spiraled out, it could actually do a lot of damage. And so I had to find ways that I could react in less severe ways. But this just kind of goes to show that like these small events can be a catalyst in your life. Even if you don't think that, even if you think whether they're small, whether they're big, they can really change, and at least you. And so, like for what I was thinking about is like a health scare might have you rushing to a gym. A tech addiction will have you running into nature, right? And so I found some wisdom in all this insecurity that I was kind of thinking about, which is you can't feel safe. You can't always feel safe. I tried to seek security, and it's hard because you try to remove yourself from the change that's actually happening, and you should be embracing that change because life is about change, right? And so there's all these paradoxes of life that I was kind of seeing, which is like the paradox of security, where you feel most insecure in the most protected environments. The paradox of abundance: too much of anything leads to inaction, and but it's always nice to have more, right? What about the paradox of speed? The faster things go, the more we feed the fast part of our brains. But what about the slow part? It's just left with nothing. And I saw a lot of this throughout my life, especially. And this kind of brings me up to this idea of like absorption of like who we become. And I saw this as kind of a constant comparing to others, an addiction of like consuming content online and checking other people's job statuses on LinkedIn, or checking to see the family on Facebook, whatever it might be. Is like uh, I found myself thinking that there's really no shame in this, right? We have this mimetic desire that has us like idolizing and imitating others who model something, whether that's wealth, whether that's maybe an audience, maybe that's some talent, whatever it might be. We try to mimic them, right? And the thing about it though is I realize that like I don't really have a responsibility to be like how other people expect me to be. It's not my. It's like it's really not my mistake. It's other people's mistake. And so it's kind of brought me to like almost some like self-accusatory depression, which was I continue to compare myself to other people, and it didn't really help me ever. In the long run, it doesn't matter, right? Why compare to other people? And so I found myself only comparing myself to the past version, and that helped me so much. And so I kind of saw myself in this like almost pretender phase, this imposter syndrome, even of, there's a lot of these identities that you hold, and maybe you can embrace this abundance mindset that you can actually be more if you think about it. And so I had to just stop trying so hard. Had to give up the perfectionism. Had to give up the overachieving, the all this other type of stuff. The only people who ultimately care about us are usually ourselves, right? I mean, I'm not saying that our family and friends and loved ones, they don't care about us, but sometimes it can be deeply upsetting that like we care way more about ourselves than we think other people care about, right? And so I kind of asked myself the question of like, how would you actually spend your life if you didn't care so much? And it shifts your perspective. So I'm gonna go a little bit faster because a little bit more to go through, but I kind of saw this as we're more connected, but we're actually more alone. And so our perspectives is really our world. So there's these echo chambers of all these beliefs online, and also in our communities and so on and so forth. But it's really necessary to just be you, right? Stop trying to fit in, stop trying to play the mold, stop trying to mime, whatever it might be. Is like just embrace the idea of you being you. Don't apologize for your quirks. Embrace them. Like, be you. And I kind of saw this as like the isolation was pretty universal. We put so much pressure on ourselves to do things like increase our social networks, but like true isolation, it has us doing things that I'm sure a lot of people mentioned this earlier. Of we do things to our bodies, our minds, and our souls that we really wouldn't do otherwise if we had a very strong sense of community. And so, this kind of brought me to this idea of like we're kind of lost in the crowd. But if we want to find say that community, we just stay small. We stay or start small. We stay consistent, and we find our unique selves, our voice. So this kind of brought me to how much information there's out in the world. There's so much information out there. How do you think even straight through how much content is kind of being thrown at us? And so I thought of this as like, knowledge is your power. Then learning is your superpower. And so, for me, it's always been reading books or reading people's maybe their tweets or some type of content that like, you can absorb years of someone's life in just a short period of time. I think that is the best power in the world, right? But sometimes knowing can be suffering. There's a lot of truth. There's a truth of abundance, truth of scarcity. But how much knowing is actually worth it? Do we actually need to know everything about everything? I don't know. And so I saw this as like a low information diet, which is how can we, or how could I, have better inputs and get better outputs? And there's this quote by Michael Pollan, which is, if it came from a plant, eat it. If it was made in a plant, don't. I kind of saw that applying to information, which was, if I could choose the inputs better, I'd get better outputs. I'd have higher quality information, higher quality books, higher quality whatever it was in my life. And so I kind of saw this as like there was kind of this bait and switch going on of, there's this pluralistic ignorance going on of, this phenomenon that, just because there's a popular idea out in the world right now, maybe not everybody believes that. And so this kind of brought me to this idea of, don't care what other people really think, just only what you think about, right? And so this brought us to like this decision tree of every day of, we're living in fear of we're living in fear when we have a lot more to give. So, feeling bad obviously sucks. Technology has just an explosion of news and information, and with that comes this dilution to the quality of that news and information. There's this famous quote of, a lie can travel halfway around the world before, or while truth is putting on its shoes. Who knows, right? But this kind of brought us to like this resilience being growing, which is, education for me was the most important thing. Learning something new every day, expanding that muscle as much as possible. I thought education for me when I joined the industry at like 16, as soon as I got my college degree, I was pretty much done. I didn't really read much. I didn't really care to grow outside of the technical stuff. But I didn't realize that this should last me a lifetime. I should be always working on myself, always growing, always seeing new perspectives, all that different type of stuff. And most importantly, there's just a lot of people's opinions telling me how to live my life, and I shouldn't let those in as much. So this there was this feigned scarcity of this fear of missing out. Maybe I'm missing out on all the new cool tech content. Maybe I'm missing out on all this this new new thing coming out or whatever it might be. I actually thought that as I started to miss out on those things, that fear turned into joy. I no longer really cared. I actually found a lot of pleasant I don't know, pleasantries, I guess, of just just not always consuming, not always having to check out the latest tech version of a framework or whatever. Not always having to see what is the latest thing coming out, right? This JOMO really helped, and so this kind of was like bringing to this finding hope. I was looking for it for so long, and that hope eventually was when I abandoned hope. I started to find it, I looked more inward to just what I could do, what I could do. Like the answer was not going to come through the door. It was always me the whole time. And so this like hierarchy of kind of what we're thinking about is like our feelings, our wants, and our needs. And I found happiness in just being in my own company. I was always born worthy, right? My inner voice was my self-reliance. I can create my own path. I can do whatever I really set my mind to. um, I didn't want to get stuck in this game. I'm more than could be measured. There's all these metrics I was chasing at a certain time where I was on TikTok and chasing followers, or I was trying to do something of like maybe the game of money or whatever it might be. Is like there's all these games I was playing, and it just didn't help at all. And so it's probably to like I have my own tribe. I can't really fool myself. I'm the easiest person to fool. I think that's Richard Feynman quote. And I continuously fooled myself for so many years in my life. And I just needed to forget my expectations. All those expectations in my life was just that, like the world just, it exists in you. And if I surrendered to those expectations that I had, or others, like maybe my parents or maybe whoever it might be, is like it didn't matter. I can give those up. And so I found a lot more by having less. And this was kind of how I found minimalism. This addition by subtraction. By I had a lot of physical stuff. I had a lot of digital stuff. I started to remove these things to add more to my life. The price of anything in life really is how much you exchange for it, like your time, right? How much could you lose? There's not much when you think about it. So I started to appreciate a lot less. I started to choose what I can do with my full autonomy. I'd only choose a few things that actually mattered in the grand scheme of things. Um, and I realized that I can only like I can achieve anything, but only if I focus on that one thing and not everything else. And so I valued what I could control, which is going back to stoicism. Stoicism helps you beat the odds, which is understand what you can control and what you can't control. It's a very important concept that I learned, and so I found this path to being more sustainable. Minimalism might not be for everyone, right? It's kind of a way of life for me, not just like a trend, but it's just like my life was messy, and I embraced that mess, and I still needed balance though to interact with it better. And so this kind of brings us like this idea of like conscious serendipity of work and luck. So as I kind of had that deterministic day, as I started to have more autonomy in what I did, I started to see myself as like not being busy. Busyness just hurts my mental health, brings that anxiety, brings a lot of stuff out. And there's this beauty to just wandering aimlessly. There's this metaphor that I really love of work like a lion, not a cow. A cow is constantly grazing. A lion is usually resting, but then always keeping its eye on its next meal. So I thought about that, and just a whole different way of seeing work. But then I started to see like I could expect the unexpected. As I found myself not being busy, I can make my own luck with all this new serendipity that I'm allowing life to bring in. I would keep my head up instead of having it down while I was working, and just so many opportunities would come because of that. And so once I was in that kind of position, I started to think about being more still and slow throughout my maybe my work or my life or whatever you want to call it. I started to create this clearing in my life of if I wanted to actually do something, I have to actually allocate time ahead of it, or else it would never get done. If I wanted to be a writer, I always had to allocate an hour every morning, and I'd anticipate that next hour, going to bed or whatever it might be. But otherwise, like you're leaving stuff up to be random, or sometimes it just doesn't work out. And being able to allocate this stuff just always helped me, and it just allowed me to always pick the right direction so that I can just start to walk and then eventually find that luck, find that serendipity. And so this helped me find things that I started to appreciate. So gratitude started to come heavily into the picture. It's very, very powerful. It helped me sit down and think and about each day. Like, what am I, what, why am I doing what I'm doing? What am I grateful for? Like all these different types of things. It goes really far as long as you can find something to appreciate. We only have a few more, so we'll get through this real quick. But it's kind of brought to nature. So nature is just good for the mind. There's this Japanese idea of Shinrin Tosu, I think. It's known as forest bathing. 20 to 30 minutes in nature can do you good. And I started to embrace that fully. Every single day, 30 minutes outside, and just does wonders to your mental health and brings clarity to your life and a lot of different other things. You can also take a deep breath, which I found, at least over the pandemic, of a lot of breathing exercises, a lot of meditations, a lot of these different types of things I experimented with. I found this Wim Hof breathing exercise of 30 breaths in just 5 minutes just could change your whole day, energize you and help you like see clear. Really cool. But that kind of brought to this idea of like checking your own pulse of, you have to love yourself before you can really love others. It's kind of like the in a plane, the oxygen mask, you got to put oxygen on yourself before others, right? You have to love yourself first, right? Before you can kind of put that out. And so there's this idea of Ubuntu. I know a lot of us probably know that as a popular distro, but it means, nourishing others before yourself. And I thought this is a very powerful idea of going back to gratitude, giving before receiving, right? So I kind of saw this as just like a cool exercise of, this one beautiful thing. Combine all this together, which is do a breath exercise, start to practice gratitude. You do some negative visualization of like, this is a Stoic idea of visualizing something that could go wrong in your life, because you can bring gratitude out of it. And, this can go a little bit further. For me, like there's this idea of energy scanning. I'm not going to go into that too much of detail, but just visualizing it's a visualization type thing. But last but not least is just think about the one beautiful thing that you want to accomplish today, and then go after it, right? That it just does so much. And so it's not that we have a short time to live, but it's just that we waste a lot of it. And you kind of notice the pattern of, I kind of have that realization throughout this whole thing. There's you might always be addicted. I've been doing this over the last 5 years of on again, off again addiction. I would call myself an internet addict as well. You come in and out of it. And so, no matter how hard you try, you might find a reason to get sucked in again. For me, almost every year, it just happens, right? And now I have all these tools, all these things that can help me. There's like the noble lie, which is, this is a Buddhist idea. I'm going to kind of give you the TLDR of it, but there's four ideas. There's this truth of suffering, a cause of suffering, an end of suffering, and then a path that leads to the end of suffering. You kind of have to come to the acceptance that, at least I did, of like what was causing my suffering. It was a lot of screen time. It was a lot of consuming. It was a lot of doing stuff on a screen, and that eventually had me having to surrender to what I knew worked. I had all these answers in my mind. I knew what would help me the most. People might say, just get off the computer, get off the television, whatever it might be. And you have to find your own path. You have to find what works for you, and you have to do that. And so, last but not least is like, it is what it is. Your ego can be deadly sometimes. It can have you chasing metrics, fame, fortune, whatever it might be. But accept it for what it is, right? So press reset, right? There's always going to be technology out there where it can be very persuasive. the house can win. Technology can be like gambling. It wins way more than every time that you play. There's really no escape for escapism. I realized that I kept trying to escape life, and it's weird because humans try to escape reality, but animals are always living in it, right? And so when it becomes the only escape, I saw myself avoiding real problems in my life that I needed to address. And so, the numbers were addictive. The metrics kind of had me forgetting why I was doing the thing I was doing. Maybe it was even the money, whatever it was. Like a lot of that stuff can happen very, very quickly in a short period of time, and then you just kind of forget why you're doing the things that you're doing. And so I always ask myself this question, which is like help or harm. Technology to me has always empowered me to do more and achieve more. But I have to ask myself, like, is certain technology helping or harming me in any way? I always would experiment with, I talked about a lot of the experiments that I did here, but I experimented with technology in a lot of different ways. I can even go through a whole list, probably in a separate talk, but I found a lot of ways that I could just avoid that harm entirely as long as I was intentional about it. And so, this kind of brought to like this unconscious hive mind of just like I was acting irrationally or just as part of a group, which is like like there's the birds and the bees of we act weird in groups. Like how can we kind of shift and become the agent of change rather than part of the herd? And so I was kind of thinking about this earlier, where I was saying about like there's this question of why. If you ask a toddler why enough, you'll realize that most people really don't know why. They don't go deeper. They don't go to the next level of like why. We just as soon as your toddler might say something like that, you'll just be like, oh, because it is the way it is, right? But there really is like a reason why. It's just that we don't want to deal with it at the time. And I found that really, really interesting. But it's just one decision away that we are from a lot of things. Each day is one decision away from your dreams and hope, or your dreams and happiness. And if you don't decide, somebody's going to decide for you. So this kind of, I saw this as like there's this collective consciousness, I guess, where you can kind of stay calm in these moments. We just went through a lot over the last 3 years, right? Sometimes even going against the grain may feel deeply, deeply wrong, but in retrospect, you'll be happy that you did, right? Maybe it's holding during an uncertain time of the stock market. Maybe it's taking a job somewhere else, right? Like it may feel deeply wrong, but you'll be glad that you did it in retrospect. So I think that's the last slide or so. I have a conclusion and Q&A, but I kind of made up these new rules. I saw this first generation of the internet come and go very, very quickly. There's new technology coming out all the time. My wife and I got addicted to TikTok. She became a social media influencer because of her TikTok content creation. I did it just for fun and found success as well. But I started to see that a lot of tech brings more problems than it solves. We kind of think about how are we how are our lives changing with it? Are we aware of what is actually changing and what rate our lives are changing? This brought up to like the idea of Hercules and the Lernaean Hydra. You cut off the head and it just comes up with two more, right? Two more problems to deal with. Just like bugs, right? So the future is going to be weird. It's kind of embracing it. This Peter Drucker quote of "You have to innovate or die," and there's a lot of truth to it. It has kind of its own stigma behind that quote in general, but like the future is going to be weird. There's a lot of cool things coming out and a lot of exciting technologies as well that we're developing for. And these trends, they come and go, but look for the boring, because the boring's fun when you see the or can appreciate the boring, right? So I talked about novelty already, kind of wearing off. Sometimes it can be disguised as manipulation until you become aware. I had my own journey. It's a whole different story about TikTok and content creation for that platform. But eventually I felt like I was almost being manipulated to create content for it. So then I stopped. And so sometimes platforms will change overnight, but your addiction to them will live on for many, many years. So I'd ask myself, why am I still on this platform? It's not doing the same thing I first signed up for. And so, like, just know that that can happen. Sometimes the truth can be dark. Tech can always be watching you, making it harder to disconnect. We live in a world with a lot of ML algorithms and tech being more persuasive and understanding your habits and what is more inclined for you to stay on those platforms, right? To leave, you sometimes have to fight a lot of the conditioning that way we developed over the years, and that's very challenging. And so it's hard to wake up from the hold sometimes that a lot of tech can have us. And last but not least, I kind of came. Let's go back to this graphic, but kind of see like the positives and the negatives. They balance each other out, right? So I kind of came to this idea. There's always two complementary forces that we think about. You can think about this as like yin yang or good bad, white black, pain pleasure, whatever metaphor you might want to think about. But really, there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And that's I think a Shakespeare quote, which is makes you think about it. Like you find good in the bad, you find bad in the good. And I found a lot of that through this whole journey. And throughout this all, I realized that I knew nothing. I read a lot of books. I'm pretty knowledgeable in certain areas, but I generally believe we know close to nothing. I feel like as we start to learn more and more, we start to come to that realization even faster, right? But I do believe in one thing, which is anything is possible as long as you have an open mind. I started to embrace this not knowing, and I just live a happier and healthier life. It's just, if someone asks you a question about something, it's like, no, I don't know, and I don't pretend to know. And you'll find an answer. You'll find a way forward. You also realize nothing throughout this whole process. There's really nothing to realize. And I know that's maybe a little bit hard to take in right now, but it might make sense later on. Which is, you can go through a lot of different philosophies, texts, ideas. For me, I found like Stoicism and Taoism and Buddhism kind of helped me realize this, that there's really not much that is there to realize out of all this. And last but not least is like you are enough. And like let me say this again because not many people say this, but like you are enough, and don't tell yourself otherwise. So. I just want to say thank you so much. Q&A. I just want to say I don't have answers, but I might have thoughts. I would love it if people shared their experiences, especially maybe around some of these topics. It makes this talk a little bit more relatable. And then just if you're interested in the book or similar material, I just have an email list, jondouglas.dev/enough. But yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, really appreciate all that, Jon. I mean, I can even just lead off by speaking for myself and say, I mean, I can certainly deeply relate to pretty much everything you were saying. I'm on my own, personal constant journey around some of this stuff. I think, some of the stuff that kind of really resonates from my side is, like some of it boils down to trying to create these, virtuous cycles and things that, good feedback loops. But the reverse is really easy to fall into too, of these like doom loops of it, and it's really hard to get out of those sorts of things. And again, I'm still very much on the learning path to how to find my own, personal sense of balance and that sort of thing. I know like one approach that I've started taking is, trying to find little, whether you call them like mantras or quotes or something to like keep in front of me, and just as like even on like a post-it or a note or something to like occasionally glance at. One of the ones that I have is like literally just busy doesn't equal productive, which is basically one thing that you were doing there. And I know personally, it's a thing I need a constant reminder of, just being in tech. And I suspect that everyone else can relate to that too. I'm curious if you have any, I know you mentioned kind of like a few quotes and things like that along the way. I'm curious if that's like a sort of approach that you take, and if there's anything kind of in particular that comes to mind along those veins.
Yeah, I've always thought busyness is a myth, and it's something that everybody loves to talk about. They always love to talk about how busy they are, but it's kind of a legend, right? Like you don't know if it's real or not, right? And so I've always thought that, uh, for being busy, you can always you can you don't have to be busy in life. Like I actually kind of found that, like I work in big tech. I'm a PM. I could literally have a calendar filled for 2 years if I wanted to, right? But I found that, that wasn't the most effective way to get work done or to do the things that I wanted. Like that I found were probably the most meaningful things from like my perspective in the role that I'm in. And I kind of found that, while I was being so busy, it's kind of like a garden. You're not able to water like the plants or the people or the projects or all that other type of stuff. Like you can't actually deeply nourish them, right? And because all we're doing is we're just like, getting to it every so often in our cycles, our weekly cycles or whatever it might be. We might be throwing a little bit of water on it, but the roots aren't growing down deep. They're actually very shallow. And that's kind of how I see busy, or at least busyness is. You have to grow it, and that takes a lot of attention, and that takes a lot of intention as well.
Absolutely. So we do have a couple questions from folks here too. So the first one that came in here is just wondering if you regret not getting into writing sooner, or maybe even back into writing sooner.
Yeah, I absolutely do regret it, but at the same time, I know that this is just part of my path. I'm 30 years old now, and I think I had to go through all this to get to the point where I can write fast, or like I wrote every day for the last 5 years. Nobody's seen most of that writing. It's like 500 words or so. I keep I journal all the time. I'm always writing, right? But I didn't have that bravery or that courage to start to publish it more, to get the word out there as much. And I would say about 2 years ago, I kind of thought, I'm going to rebrand everything that I've done. I was kind of known as just like a Xamarin person at a time, which was weird for my career. And I want to be the tech guy. I didn't want to be the .NET guy. I didn't want to be the nougat guy. Like I didn't want a label on me. I wanted my own thing. I want to be John. I want to be a person you can relate to. He has the same problems you do. And I kind of saw that as like an initial journey of I wanted to help people in tech. And so I started to help people in tech. I started creating a brand for myself of Jon Douglas, and you know, and now I'm starting to try to get away from tech and start to get back into writing. And so I absolutely do regret like not doing that sooner. I wish from day one I would build in public. I would write in public. I would post my thoughts out in public, because if you can change just one person's life with a word you say or some words you say, it's meaningful, even though you won't know it, right? I think I think Shakespeare actually wrote about this, which is something about how, 500 or 200 years or 500 years, whatever it is, later, people started recognizing his work, right? And he never got that during his actual, you know, years here, right? And so that's what I think about too is you won't get that reward. And does it really matter? You do it for yourself, right? So
Yeah. So the next one up, we this will be a tough one, but we'll see. So like, how do you approach balancing, say, techno advancement within the technology field, with knowing when to put a stop to the infinite learning paths that are really just out there, right?
yeah, I've struggled with this one a lot, and I think a lot of people do. You can go and find like the tech adoption curve, like the Gartner one or whatever. I've always I initially thought that that was like the idea, which is when tech can get through like the trial of disillusion or whatever. Like maybe you start to adopt it, maybe you start to learn it, maybe you start to whatever it is. Like maybe it's a new something new, like it could be autonomous cars, could be machine learning, whatever it might be. There are trends that come and go, and they are worthwhile to hop on sometimes, right? Like, I have a friend who is a LinkedIn influencer of like over 150,000 followers. I don't know what they have on LinkedIn, but he got into data science when data science wasn't a thing, and it's just super interesting because he put all of his, like you take these risks, and those risks can pay off for you in a lot of different ways. I saw mobile development as kind of being that thing. I put a lot of I took a huge risk on it. Like I bet my whole career on, well, not my whole career, I'd say a portion of my career on that tech, which was mobile development, because I thought it was going to stay around. And so, there's this balance of you can have as much data in the world to make a informed choice, but you also have an opinion that you have to drive that comes from within. You have to believe it in it before you can actually find it worthwhile. For me, like recently with crypto and blockchain and stuff, like there was a lot of fun and trends and excitement. And as soon as I started to get into it, it's like I didn't believe in it, and it was hard for me to learn. And so that's just my personal perspective. I just on the technology side of things, but I think other things about crypto. But yeah, I think you truly have to believe in it, and I think it also depends on your what you value. Do you value a market that already has a lot of adoption for it? Like there's a lot of things you have to ask yourself of, like, what are your values of it? Doesn't have to always be the most popular thing.
I guess with that in mind, the next question that we have up here is, how do you see yourself 10 years from now? Or, alternatively, what do you have, like say a 10-year goal, set in mind at this point?
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite questions that I got from I interviewed at Goldman Sachs, like right in college, and they asked the weirdest questions, like like 10 years in the future. 10 years is really hard to gauge, and I think with age though, it's a lot easier to gauge because you can appreciate how long a year actually is. In early 20s, 10 years was like crazy to see where my life was and where it is now. I would have never believed it, right? I wanted to be a DBA back when I was 18. I don't think many DBAs exist anymore, but it's still a job. It's still out there. It's still something that people do. But I saw myself as, like, for 30 going into 40. I want to be, like I mentioned earlier, I want to be a best-selling author. I want to have my own brand of helping people with whatever relatable content I can produce from the various challenges that I've gone through. And like I just want to write. Like, I'll be honest, if I can just sit in a cabin and write all day, I really would. And I think there's a lot of interesting things. People say you have to live a very interesting life to write. I think that's partially true, but at the same time, I think everybody in the world has a lot to share, and it's just the choice of whether we do that or whether we don't.
Cool. So I guess, so if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to drop them in before we close out. I guess, I have one other one that kind of comes to mind, just to seed it and give folks a second if they have anything else to chime in with. But one of the things that you mentioned in passing, I think, was that, that you've been a remote worker for, a pretty long time, pre-pandemic. It was something that, and pre, this journey, it sounds like, as well. So I'm interested in, as a result of, say, this journey that you've gone on, mixed with, everything that's happened in the world in the last 2 years, especially, and the world becoming far more remote. Like, has it changed your approach to working remotely with folks and maintaining, relationships and work-life balance and all those sorts of things?
Yeah. So just for some context, I actually started remotely working when I was 16, which is crazy. I was able to, do it like with websites at we had this historic 25th Street website association. I did all the websites. I got to work wherever I wanted to, and that eventually evolved. But with regards to remote work and the pandemic, a lot of things has changed. I was actually very spoiled that I got to see how remote work can actually work before it became very mainstream. I got to work at a remote first company, which was Xamarin. Everyone was remote. Everyone came from all different walks of life and all throughout the world. Everyone had different perspectives and opinions on how to do remote working. I brought a lot of that, to where I work. And I found that it has its own challenges. You can't just go remote first, right? Like it's a struggle sometimes. Like that's where we want to be. Everyone wants to be remote first, but a lot of places are still stuck in remote friendly, and those two, the definitions of those two can be very debatable. But like we're living in a world now where people are preferring remote in certain situations, and people are still preferring the office, and we have to figure out how to bridge that. But with regards to working remote, there's a lot of different ways that I think it can be accomplished successfully. I think with balancing your life, especially, you have to think async first, which is um, do certain things need your attention right now? Do they need your attention in this current working day or your working hours? And being able to like you know I don't know what the best way to put it is, but again, finding that determinism of making meetings more asynchronously, doing more things asynchronously, getting in the habit of doing everything async first. I think it has everyone shifting their like how they work, I guess. It's my personal preference, but at the same time there's certain things where you absolutely need to sync with people. There's certain times where you have to be able to put like a stake in a line in the sand or whatever it is to make progress on something, and you might need a meeting for that. But I do believe that at least 80% of the work that at least like what I do, and like maintaining open source projects and things like that, is it can mostly be done asynchronously. And I think that's just been the challenge that we've kind of lived, is how do we take the leap of that gap when some people don't even have any experience working remotely like that.
Cool. So we've got a couple more that are coming in here too, because we got a nice engaged crew. Definitely appreciate that, especially for a topic like this. So I guess first, it sounds like a trip back to your maybe your minimal comments earlier of just wondering, do you have a tiny home? Like, what's your sort of setup like that?
Yeah, I so my house is actually it's a house, right? Like I live in it. My life is messy, but I am intentional with a lot of the things that I have in my house. I do like certain aesthetics, which is I do keep a minimalist, you know, I don't know, like ideal mind, I guess. I work on it as much as everyone else does, which is like I used to be like a collector. I loved collecting things, and then eventually I started to not find as much joy in that. And so, finding new homes for the things I collected, and repurposing a lot of the things that I already had. And like if you walked in, like I talked about this in my book, which is if you walked into my house, you'd be like, this person's not a minimalist. What are you talking about? And I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think it's a mindset. I don't think you have to be a person who has six belongings and you carry them around everywhere, and have a desk so neatly organized that you know where everything is. I think life is messy. I think living in our life, and embracing that mess is part of the journey. But you have to kind of have that idea of like, minimalism doesn't just extend to physical objects, it's also digital. I mentioned this earlier, but I didn't talk about some of the experiments that I've done. I'm a social media minimalist. I follow zero people on social media. It's not because I don't think people are interesting. I have other ways, like there's obviously lists and different ways to engage with people. But I found that the noise was just too much. I found that everyone was talking about a lot of things that they just weren't really relevant in my life, and everyone had a different idea of how they're living their lives and sharing that. And I was not I wasn't focused on mine. I wasn't like doing what I really wanted to embrace. And so I'm a social media minimalist, a digital minimalist. I mentioned earlier that I have a device for different things in my life, a job to be done. I'm talking to you through a personal MacBook right now that I only do things like this and write on. Like that's all I really do on that thing. I have an iPad that I do reading on. That's it. And I give these things jobs to be done so that I can live in this, more minimal idea. Because otherwise, if everything is, say, messy in those areas, I regress, like Greg mentioned. Like I kind of regress and I fall back into bad habits. I do things I normally wouldn't, or maybe that is just who I am. I don't know. But yeah, I have to find that minimalism through other ways. But you know, I do have some pictures on Instagram if you want to look at them. But I do have some pictures of my kids and my house, and it is a little bit more minimalist than many, but I wouldn't say by far.
Fair enough. And one more that we've got here. So do you have any tips that you could offer on, say, finding a balance between a sense of community with others, especially particularly when you're unemployed, between others' expectations, the hustle of trying to try to find a better way for yourself and constantly trying to advance your skills, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah. My biggest piece of advice is find a like find what you want to be doing, an identity. And I talked about like imposter syndrome in a sense, but think about identity in a way of like, what's the future version of you doing, right? Like what would they do? And then start to embrace that identity. So if you're in the future, say you wanted to maybe I don't know, maybe get a job, maybe work out 5 times a week, maybe work on a side project that brings you riches, whatever it might be. Is like start to embrace the habits and the identity of what that person might do. And then the second step is really simple: show up every single day. I wanted to learn how to play basketball. Never really played basketball in my life. This last year, I said, well, if I just show up every single day and I put myself in front of that court, eventually people will want to play with me. I'll build my own community around it. I'll also, people will know me as like, that's the person who shows up at 6 in the morning to shoot hoops for 20 minutes. And you might be that person that is very engaged, or sorry, approachable, and you can find a lot of engagement through that. So showing up and being consistent is huge. And a lot of people underestimate that, but not many people are willing to show up every single day. And that persistence shows through. So when I started a user group in Utah, it was very similar. I led this group, and we had maybe 1 or 2 people who initially would start to show up, but we kept going and we kept showing up and we kept showing up, and then eventually that 2 turned to 4, that 4 turned into 6. We eventually had a group that was upwards of 30, right? And it's very cool because you have to show that it's still living, like something is still there. And so that to me is very important. So instill what you want, your identity, and then just show up. That's it.
Awesome. Well, that's the last question that I saw in there, but I think that's actually a pretty fantastic, kind of point to tie this off on. So, Jon, just want to say thanks again for some amazing content, for putting yourself out there, sharing your experiences with me and our group here. Also, really thank you for everyone for asking a lot of good questions and being engaged. That even from my perspective and our perspective, like that means a lot from being able to do these sorts of things. And I think especially for a topic like this, it's certainly something that resonates, I think, with pretty much the entire industry. So really appreciate the engagement. But Jon, thank you again. Thanks to everyone for showing up. Please do check out our schedule. Like I said, we've got the next few meetings up there, already up on the site. Going to keep planning some more stuff going forward. In the meantime, hope everyone is continuing to stay safe and healthy, and hopefully we'll see you soon. But until then, have a great night, folks.